Today we're going to talk about the Sigma 90mm F2.8 Dg Dn Contemporary. There are plenty of lenses on the E-mount system that can do portraits, and this is one of them with the smallest aperture. And at the same time, this lens can produce extremely pleasing background blur. It has some properties that makes it highly desirable. More on that later. F2.8 is slow for a prime lens, and that's how Sigma managed to get the size down on this lens. I'm gonna make a case on why you might enjoy this lens. For kicks, I'll compare the sharpness with the Sony 85mm f1.8. And before going further, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe for a constant feed of gear reviews. I love camera explorations as much as I do escapades, and I have a feeling you do too. Alright, let's get right into it with the design of this lens. The lens comes in this very small and unassuming box that's heavy for its size. The first thing you notice is how absolutely gorgeous the lens is, just like my wife 15 years ago. The lens has an all-metal construction. The optics include 10 groups and 11 elements, 9 rounded aperture blades, a minimum focus distance of 19.7 inch or 50 centimeters, which is a 1:5 magnification ratio, and that's very close for lenses in this focal range. It has a 55mm front filter thread, and it's tiny. It's comparable to the Sony 28mm f2. However, this thing comes in at a whopping 295 grams. It's small and dense like Danny DeVito. Wow. Starting off at the bottom, the lens has a weather sealing gasket. However, no mention of in-body seals. The lens has an AF/MF switch, and it's nice having a physical control on the body. There's an aperture wheel that has 1/3 stop increments. However, it is click only and there is no clickless option. And I'm glad Sigma gave something rather than nothing. If I had to choose, I would take clicked aperture rather than clickless anytime. The manual focus ring is pure bliss. It reminds me of old Zeiss lenses. And in practical use, it works extremely well. STM focus systems tend to be a little jumpy. However, with this grease-filled focus ring, it feels like you can't make that mistake. The lens comes with 2 front caps. This is the magnetic one. Works very well. However, there is a huge flaw. You cannot use it with the hood or with filters. There's no way to remove the magnetic cap once you have the hood on. And speaking of the hood, it's extremely high quality and very large compared to the lens. Next up, autofocus. How does this vintage looking like lens perform? Let's take a look. High-end autofocus is kind of expected with Sony bodies, and this lens does not disappoint. It tracks very well. Look at that smooth transition in the background. It's nice and blurry. And here is the #1 feature of this lens. You can get right up to it and it still focuses on you. When it comes to autofocus in stills mode, the lens seldomly misses and does an overall fantastic job. It really excels when it comes down to tracking your every little movement, just like Facebook. To illustrate how low of a light level this is, I have my phone camera right here, and you can see how bright it is compared to the rest of the lighting. We are at 1/60th shutter, f2.8, ISO 2000. And the autofocus seems to be maxed out at this point. It struggles below this point. However, as you can see here, once you hit the sweet spot, then it does focus fairly well. Here it is going past the light into a backlit scenario. And the performance is good. There is no jerkiness, which I like about this lens. Nice smooth rack. Don't we all love it? Up next is sharpness. Let's have a look. Comparing sharpness wide open, here it is with the Sony 100%. In the center wide open at 1.8 versus 2.8. I would say the Sigma is sharper in this area. However, the 85 is very good. Here is the mid frame. It is similar. Going to the far edges, I would say that the Sigma has better contrast, much better contrast in this area. Sharpness levels are similar, if not the same. Onward to real world sharpness with the Sigma. Wide open, you can see there is quite a bit of vignetting. Let's take a look at the center. 100% nice and crispy. Moving towards the mid frame, and it's still nice and crispy. Keep in mind, we are wide open right now. And the far edges, you can see the details in this light column. It is crunchy. The details in this trash bin right here, nice and crunchy. So wide open, the performance is very good. Stop down to f4, 100%. It gets a little bit more crispy, but I can tell that we are approaching the max sharpness of this lens. Nice and crispy column. F5.6, it got a little better. F8 and F11. Being extremely sharp, can you guess how the bokeh behaves? Let's see. Starting off at the edge, as you can see that there is football shaped bokeh, and that is a common theme of this lens. No matter where the shooting distance is, you can see that there is some variation of this football bokeh. However, the bright side is that there's not much outlining at all. Being an f2.8 small prime lens, there's only so much this aperture can do in terms of blurring capabilities. The blur is very creamy along the varying distances, and that's what this lens is good at, just pure quality bokeh. What about chromatic aberration and bokeh CA, aka LoCA? Closer inspection, let's get mid-frame, 100%, and there is simply not a lot of chromatic aberration here. This is around mid-frame or the top of the frame. You can see there is some. We're still at f2.8, moving to the far corners, and it's much more prominent. However, it's still not a whole lot. This is like the furthest part of the edge right here. It's not a whole lot. f4 and f5.6. It doesn't go away, and that's just one of the quirks about this lens. Having a look at LoCA. Here we are, and the focus is right here. There's no obvious transitions. If we look at the fingertips with the shiny light mark, there is a little bit right there. Right here, can't see much. Let's take another photo. Here's the focus right here, and the transition, it's not very greenish or purplish. So when it comes to LoCA, it's not something to be concerned about. How well does this lens handle focus breathing? Let's have a look. Pay attention to these walls and see how they move in and out of the frame. A lens with low focus breathing should not move much. As you can see, the 90mm f2.8 does very well in this scenario. There you go once again. It has very little focus breathing. All you can see is the blur, and that's how you want a lens to behave. Good job, Sigma. Cinema level performance, consumer level pricing. Next up, we'll take a look at flare and Sunstars. Let's take a look at the flaring. It is quite prominent. It is a short telephoto after all. Flaring in this type of lens range is fairly common. You can see that the contrast gets hit once the flare hits the lens at a certain angle. So if you're shooting into the sun a lot, just be aware of this situation. Use that bucket hood. It's very huge for a reason. When it comes to Sunstars, this lens does perform decent, not fantastic. As you can see, the Sunstars are there. I think there's too many of them, and this is at f16 and it's not super prominent. It's not very sharp. However, I believe that is the nature of telephoto lenses. I do not know of many telephoto lenses that perform well with Sunstars. Did Sigma sell their souls to the distortion gods? Let's have a look. To make this lens small, there must have been a compromise, and that was distortion. Are you ready for it? Let's have a look. No, please God, no. There it is. There's quite a bit of pincushion, like someone punching you in the gut. It's a great thing that these things are done in camera with very little image quality lost. Some sample snapshots and clips. Alright, so f2.8 lenses are not the most sexiest things in the world, and the sheer talk of it can strike fear right into the hearts of photographers. And to that I say the fear is warranted. I have a hard time getting over it myself. This lens is priced at $639, which is more than budget 85s, and the driving point is that this is an unintrusive lens that performs extremely well. What I've observed is that if larger gear leads to me leaving my gear at home, then it feels like I'm leaving something I love behind. However, I wouldn't mind leaving my kids behind once in a while. The Sigma 90 Contemporary can be a great partner for you if you like taking pictures and clips which keep the story flowing. And with its amazingly small size and close focus ability, I think it really is the king of B-roll. Let me know what you think below and see you on the next one. Take care.